Well, hello there, Tampa Bay, and welcome to the Tampa Bay Community Network Sports Talk. I'm your host, Coach Chuck White, and my guest is Mr. Lannis Robinson, the Athletic Director for Hillsborough County Public School. He's been there for 7 illustrious years, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy him because he has much to say that is important, not only for the students, but for the parents as well. We're going to talk about how a student can become a player on many of the different teams, so just stand back and listen as we bring it to you. We're also going to talk about the responsibilities and the requirements of the school, the coaches, the team, and the parents. So most particularly, we're going to talk about the student himself. Well, Mr. Robinson, I'd like to say welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, it's been a pleasure. We've had you here before, and maybe we might want to let our new listeners get acquainted with you because we picked up so many new listeners now till they need to know something about you. So how long have you been with the Hillsborough County Public School Athletic Directorship?
I've been in this position for about 7 years now.
And before that, what I should have asked, before that, how long, what have you been doing before you became the athletic director of the county?
Well, before that, I was an assistant principal for administration, which includes serving as the athletic director at Wharton High School. And I was also a teacher and a coach prior to that as well.
Yeah. Where did you coach?
Out at Plant City High School.
That's what I thought. Plant City Raiders, is that right?
That's correct.
All right. Well, I know everybody have a person they have to report to and everything, so who is your supervisor? Who's your boss? I know most people don't like to say the boss, but who is your supervisor?
Okay, my immediate supervisor is Mr. George Gaffney, the assistant superintendent for instructional support. And of course, I work for the school district, so the superintendent, Mrs. Mary Ellen Elia, is another of my bosses. Yeah. But ultimately, we all work for the school board, those 7 elected officials that oversee the school district.
And you're also under the auspices of the Florida State High School Athletic Association coming out of Gainesville. Is that what it is?
That is correct. Yeah. In that situation, our schools, we're members of the Florida High School Athletic Association, so we're held to the responsibility of adhering to all the rules and regulations that govern high school athletics.
You know, there are a lot of things I know you have to do, but why don't you just take your time and explain some of the duties or most of the duties that you perform from that office? Okay.
Obviously, the athletics department, we're involved in every aspect of the athletic program. We oversee, in my office, 27 high schools and 46 middle schools. And when I say oversee, that includes all of the operations, including making sure that transportation is provided, making sure we have uniforms, all of the equipment and supplies that are needed to operate the different sports. And then obviously we deal with some discipline sometimes and all of the things that are associated with running the program.
Wow, that's a lot of responsibility there. What has a student to do? Say, for example, my son or my daughter wanted to become a member of a football or volleyball or basketball team. What has one to do?
Well, the first thing is they have to be a good student athlete. So they have to maintain a GPA that is acceptable, which the minimum is 2.0, but obviously we want our student athletes to perform better than that. And then there's paperwork involved as far as consent and liability release forms, have to have a physical, have to have the required insurance that we require. And then there's a media release, and there's more paperwork, but all in all, they have to submit all of that information to the school prior to participation.
Insurance is the responsibility of the students of the school?
Of the students and the families. We have a policy that governs all of our and protects all of our student athletes, and it is a required portion of being involved in our athletic program.
should they have to have an examination, a physical examination or anything?
Yes, sir. That is a requirement to have a physical, a current physical, which means that it's within the last 365 days, and they have to be cleared to participate without limitations.
Wow. So there's a lot of responsibility of the parents to see that these students get these things done as well. So how much time do you give a student, say the season start, maybe on a certain date, practices start, how much time has a student to do these things or get these things completed before the season or before practice starts?
Well, they can turn in all of that paperwork as early as May 15th for the following school year. So they theoretically have all summer to take care of that. And then we have sports, obviously, that start later in the year in October, and then in January we have different seasons. So it's just a matter of which sports they're going to be playing and when it's going to be due to the school.
Are there any hardship cases, for example, say a kid comes from a very low-income family, he's a very good athlete, and he or she wants to play sports, but they just can't afford to pay for these things? Are there any way that
Absolutely. You know, that's a situation where the family needs to go in and talk to the school and communicate the issues, and the schools will do everything possible to try to work with families.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because I know there are a lot of families with large responsibilities and very low incomes. Now, we're talking about the responsibility of the parent. We're talking about the responsibility of the student. What responsibility has the school or you as athletic director have to the school, or the school has to the students?
Well, the very first thing is to offer a good program. And then inside of that program, we are responsible for providing for the safety of our students and our student athletes at all times. And then beyond that, you know, just a product that they could be proud of when it comes to competition, the amounts of competition, the uniforms, transportation. We want to make sure that we treat all of our sports fairly and equally. We want to make sure that we cover our girls. You know, we don't want to be out of compliance with Title IX or gender equity requirements. So we take all those things into consideration and try to have a unified program. And in our district, we have what's called centralized funding, which means that we treat School A the same as we treat School B, and then the same thing with all the different sports.
There have been some talk about students transferring, students living in one area and going to school elsewhere where he should not be going. He's not going to the school where he's supposed to be. I think one of the schools had a big problem a couple of years ago.
Yeah, transferring has always been an issue, not just here recently, but you know, as far as I can remember back, it's an issue that we've tried to address. State legislators have tried to address, the Florida High School Athletic Association has tried to address, our specific school district has addressed, and obviously the whole idea is to try to have a level playing field for all athletes, and students are going to the schools that they're actually supposed to be going to, and then participating at those schools that they're supposed to be attending.
I know there's a penalty for the student, but what about the coach who allow these things to happen?
That's, you know, it's a fair question. The challenge in that is you have to prove that the coach was made aware prior to. It's a lot easier to deal with and prove invalid transfer versus trying to prove what you're referring to, which would be known as recruiting of a student athlete. So it's a very delicate balance. It's a very tricky situation to navigate, and we have you know, because it becomes a personal issue, and sometimes it can be quite invasive to people's personal lives.
Right. Well, I read where there was a committee that you had formed, and you meet so often, or you have met, and you worked out some rules where if he starts in 9th grade or something, he has to stay unless he meets with that committee and they approve something. Why don't you explain that, because we got a lot of parents need to hear this.
Okay. We've had a transfer committee in place. The transfer committee, like you stated, after initial enrollment in the 9th grade, any student that transfers to one of our schools, one of our 27 public high schools, they have to go through a process. It's an appeals process, because if they don't go through the appeals process, they can't play for a calendar year. Obviously, we've had some legal challenges related to that, and we're working through those as well. But the fundamental idea behind it is to try to make it a situation where students that are at a particular school playing a particular sport, they don't wind up getting penalized later because someone on their team didn't follow the rules. And that was has been the intent of it from the very beginning, to make sure that all those students that are changing schools, transferring schools, are doing so legally and legitimately.
What person served on this committee?
Oh, well, we have several people that serve on the committee. It's a committee made up of 7 to 9 people, and we don't have the same 7 or 9 people because it could become taxing on individuals' time. But there are groups that are represented. We have administrators in our district. We have district level administrators in our district, and then we have some community volunteers that have served on our committee. And like you said, we meet once a month to hear cases, and so far over the 15-month history, we've had about 700 cases. So it's a big deal. It's a big process, but at the end of the day, it's serving the student athletes in our district pretty well.
One thing, if I had a kid participating in high school, I would think about his safety, especially in football, particularly in football. They've been talking about concussions. In the heat of the day when the guys out at practice, I read where guys not only have fallen out, but they passed away from things, overexhausted. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. You know, the unfortunate part about playing sport is that you run the risk of injury.
Yes.
And up to death. And,
yes.
And that's always written in all of the documents that you have to sign in order to play sports. And it's an unfortunate part of it. However, with education, more education of the coaches, of the parents, of the athletes on proper technique, proper nutrition, proper hydration, we can try to avoid some of these types of situations. But you know, unfortunately, it's not a perfect situation, and you know, we've had experienced some bad situations, and we'll continue to try to get better at it all the time. But ultimately, it comes down to education of all the stakeholders, and like I said, that's coaches, parents, student athletes, administrators, everyone involved in the program.
Coaches have to go to clinics. Coaches go to learn how to administer proper medical procedures, first aid. You have medical people themselves there. And I thought just a few years back, it was a mandatory thing to have a defibrillator or something at all of the practice field and an ambulance and that kind of medical thing.
Well, we don't have defibrillators. I want to make sure we say that right. We don't have defibrillators at all the fields. We have them accessible to all the fields. So if you're at a particular school on a given afternoon, there's a defibrillator somewhere close. It may not be at that field, but it's somewhere close, because all the research says you have to use that within a certain time frame, and it's not a very long time. So we need to be able to get to it quickly and use it if we have to. And we've actually had a few cases where we've used defibrillators on students, athletes, or coaches in both cases, fortunately, and we were able to help them.
Right.
So that's definitely something there. And then also, you know, as far as ambulances, we don't have ambulances on campus all the time. It's generally just our larger events, games and contests when we're expecting large crowds. But otherwise, you know, obviously with the invention of cell phones, we definitely use we use the cell phones to get a hold of emergency personnel as quickly as we need to.
What about protecting the fans from And what about student control and supervision of the activities?
Yeah, we obviously at a game we have we assign administrators. We hire deputies or TPD to work our contest so that we can provide the ample amount of security. We sweep the parking lots during contests. I mean, you know, we take every consideration into mind to try to provide the safest environment as possible.
Wow, you're right on top of things, and I know parents like to hear that. You know, one of the big things that happened in schools just recently, I think the first Wednesday of every year, I think it was around the 5th this year, when they had the National Letter of Intent, the National Signing Day.
Yes, sir.
How much emphasis are placed on this National Signing Day?
Well, I mean, it's a pretty big deal because when a student athlete signs a national letter of intent to a Division I, Division II college, typically that means that they're receiving lots of money from that university to go to attend school. So it's a pretty big deal. It's a mix. It's a mix of they've done what they needed to do in the classroom as well as they've performed well in some type of athletic event. So it's to be congratulated, it's to be celebrated. Obviously, and the stats really don't lie, and this is important for everyone involved in athletics to realize. The national average of student athletes in high school that get a college scholarship is less than 2%.
Wow, less than 2%.
That's a pretty big number to understand because I think most parents and students think they're going to get a college scholarship, and the numbers say just the opposite.
Well, one thing I want the parents to understand, if he goes to a 4-year school as opposed to a 2-year JUCO or junior college, just because he goes to a 4-year school doesn't mean that he has a 4-year guaranteed scholarship.
That is definitely a misnomer.
Yes,
that is
it's
definitely.
a full 1-year scholarship.
Actually, it's 5. It's 5 1-year scholarships. So that means that when a student athlete signs a letter of intent, they're going to. I'm a Florida State grad, so I'll use Florida State. They sign with Florida State, and we happen to be the national champions in football. Got to throw that out there.
You got to get that one in.
If student signs with Florida State 10 school, that is a renewable annually. That's at the discretion of the coach. So that means that the student athlete needs to be taking care of what they need to take care of inside the classroom.
All right.
And then living up to the expectations of that athletic program. So it's really important that, like you said, that families understand that just because they get there doesn't mean they get to stay there. They have to work hard to maintain.
Well, I'm the guardian of a grandchild, David White, who attends my alma mater, Florida A&M University, defensive back. He is in his sophomore year, but he's a redshirt sophomore, which means he is not charged with playing this sophomore year because he had torn ligaments in his shoulder, and we hope he gets better where he can come back. I have 2 other grandchildren who are in the public school now. Johnny Liggins, he's the King High School golfer. And he's one of the leading golfers in this district and this county. He made all district and all county. I have another grandchild, a daughter, Chelsea Liggins, who's going to Bloomingdale High School, and she's playing volleyball, expected to go. What part does the ACT, the other test program, play for a guy to become a signee?
Okay.
Is that later he takes the ACT or the SAT, or he has to have that before he could sign a national letter of intent?
Okay. There's the NCAA puts out a sliding scale, and that sliding scale can be found at ncaa.org or at the schools. The best way to explain it is the higher your core GPA, and core GPA is math, science, English, social studies.
Okay.
And then there are a few electives such as Spanish that could play into that. But your core GPA, the higher your core GPA, the lower your test score can be. The lower your core GPA is, the higher your test score must be. So they're a sliding scale, but they work opposite. Right. Now, there are minimums for both test score as well as GPA, but they work in tandem. And so in order for a student athlete, and the rule is changing here, they have to have, for a student athlete, they have to have 16 core credits, 16 core math, science, English, social studies, and then it all depends on what their core GPA equates out to be, what test score is required. If they have the GPA and they have the test score, then they could be what's called a full qualifier. If they're lacking in one of those areas, they might be a partial qualifier, and then there are some rules and stipulations that pertain to that.
On this National Signing Day, football seemed to be getting more attention at the time. Are there other sports that kids can sign, other sports team players that can sign, like soccer, track and field?
Well, there are actually, and you're absolutely right, the football signing day gets the most attention, but there are actually 3 periods for signings, and it's not a signing day, it's really a period of time that can be signed. There are 3 periods that student athletes can sign. There's an early signing period in November, then there's February, and then there's April. Mm-hmm. And the signing window is open actually for a week or 2, and I'm not exactly sure how long they keep it open any longer. But yes, other sports. Mm-hmm. But remember, I told you there was November, and then there's February, and then there's April. It depends on which sport, because not all sports can sign in all 3 of those periods. The NCAA has an established calendar. The one in February, the first Wednesday in February, like you mentioned, that's the first time that football can sign. Football student athletes can sign, and that's the one that gets the most national notoriety.
If a student wants to play 2 sports, say he wants to play football and he wants to play baseball, can he sign both sports letters of intent?
No, he can only sign with one school, but the school, you know, they put together the package that is offered. So it may be 50% football, 50% baseball.
Okay.
That could happen. But I think there's also a misunderstanding. Outside of football, most scholarships are partial scholarships outside of football. And I don't think everyone understands that. Typically, for, let's say, using Florida State again, and these numbers are not going to be accurate, but they're given an illustration. For let's say at Florida State on the baseball team, if it's a 40-man roster, they may be given 20 scholarships. Well, in order to get 40 people on the team, they may give 40 half scholarships, or they might give 10 fulls and then split the other 10.
Okay.
They have 20 full scholarships, let's say. And that's just an example. Those numbers probably are not anywhere close to accurate, but I think it gives an illustration of how they're done.
Very, very well said. Now, DeAndre Porter, quarterback over at Jefferson High School.
Signed with Florida.
Yes, but what I'm trying to get with, first of all, he verbally committed to the University of South Florida, and everybody thought he was going to University of South Florida. But then when signing day come, he signed with the University of Florida, and not to play quarterback. They say, we're not signing you to play quarterback. We're signing you as an athlete, and we think in our program you fit better as a defensive back. So can you commit publicly verbally to a school, and then when the signing day you change your mind and sign with another school? How legal is that?
Until the student athlete has signed on that piece of paper.
Yes.
And that piece of paper is received at that school, it's not legal.
Okay.
So they can say whatever they want leading up to. They can tweet whatever they want. Yeah. But at the end of the day, it's not until they sign and send it in.
So if you don't have anything in writing, you don't have a student coming into you. Well, I noticed they also sign with the NCAA, like the 4-year schools, and then they sign with the NAIA, like the JUCO or the junior college.
That's actually not junior college. Those are 4-year universities.
They're 4 years too,
yes, sir.
Smaller schools.
Just smaller schools.
Yeah, so if they sign with one school and decide to go to another school, do they have to get a release from the school to go elsewhere?
Yes, sir. Once they sign and send it into the school, then they're held accountable to that commitment.
Well, I think it should be. I like to think of college students, high school students, first of all, as a student athlete. And you mentioned the grades that they have to make. How many schools do you have to supervise? I mean,
27 high schools.
27 high schools. How many coaches?
Coaches, about 2,000.
I think we'll save that for another show because we've done so well, and I'm sure the people have enjoyed having you, and I've certainly enjoyed having you. And I'd like to get you back sometime again and talk to it. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this show as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you. So be with us again on our next show right here on the Tampa Bay Community Network Sports Talk.
Tampa Bay Community Network, may I help you?
Hello, I would like to produce a TV show on your planet.
Great.
Do I have to be a Tampa resident?
No, you don't have to be from Tampa to take our video production training classes or to have a show on our channels.
Really? Well, I'm from another planet. Is that okay?
It's fine. Tampa Bay Community Network members come from Orlando, Valrico, Lakeland. They come from everywhere. Being from another planet is no problem. You're from our galaxy, right?
Yes, I am. How do I get started?
Sign up for orientation class. We have them twice a month and they are free.
I'm in. Sign me up.
Anyone over the age of 18 can take TBCN Video Production and Final Cut Pro edit classes, produce programming, and host programming right from our studios at the University Mall. Call 813-977-5200 today and sign up for our next orientation class, no matter what planet you're from.
Hands can do incredible things. Now they can even help save a life with hands-only CPR. If you see an adult suddenly collapse, just call 911, then push hard and fast in the center of the chest until help arrives. Learn more at handsonlycpr.org.